So we hear stories from people all the time of, wow, I really love this intermittent fasting. I'm losing so much weight and man, do I feel fantastic. And dang, why did it just stop working all of a sudden for no reason? I'm doing the same thing. How come I'm not losing any more weight? So in this video, I'm going to help you understand 6 reasons that your intermittent fasting weight loss results have stalled, even some issues the fasting itself can create, and steps you can take to turn the situation around and see your fasting results again. Here we go.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So I'm going to explain some things that could be going wrong if you're not seeing any more results from fasting, and I am going to explain some things where fasting can create trouble. And the problem number 6, which is probably the most common issue, seems to be the most problematic for most people, and that might freak you out just a little bit. And keep in mind that I'm a fan of intermittent fasting. I use intermittent fasting. I use it with some of my clients. I even have entire courses on how to do intermittent fasting the right way. But I like to use it on the right people and in the right circumstances the right way. Just don't take the point of view because somebody's going to put in the comments down there, well, people been fasting for thousands of years and they didn't have none of these problems. And I understand that, Roscoe, but what we're looking at is that those were different people. That was a long time ago. And they dealt with a lower level of environmental toxins that we deal with. It was a different situation. So don't compare people fasting now to back like when Hippocrates was having people fast. That was quite a long time ago. They didn't even have TikTok then. So what we want to understand is that just about any type of diet approach can create results initially. Any type of change, especially a dietary change, can change what's going on in the body and allow the person to let go of some stored fat initially. But most of these diet approaches only work for a short period of time, and then the body adjusts, and then whatever is actually causing the body to have a hard time letting go of stored fat comes right back, and then the person doesn't really see any results. So this can be going on with intermittent fasting as well. Intermittent fasting is not immune to this thing that we see so commonly with weight loss attempts. And I'll put a link in the description below for a study that shows us that the actual act of intermittent fasting, just this time-restricted type of eating, really doesn't show much better results than pretty much any diet out there. The reason that this intermittent fasting is seeing such glorious results right now is because that a lot of people are understanding how to do it the right way. So the first thing that we want to look at is that a lot of people make too many intermittent fasting mistakes. They're doing things the wrong way because there's some fasting gurus out there that just say, just put it in a window. You can eat whatever you want as long as you're only eating in your eating window and you don't eat in your fasting window. And that just doesn't work for most people. And there's a lot of other very common mistakes like breaking your fast the wrong way, not getting enough protein or good fats, or eating too many carbohydrates, and all these other things that people do wrong. And we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 9 mistakes that are restricting your ability to lose weight on intermittent fasting. And those are just simple dietary mistakes that people make, and you want to make sure that you rule those out so that you're not making the common mistakes. But in this video, we want to look at things that are going wrong physiologically that can really restrict your ability to lose weight while you're fasting. So just keep in mind that the confusion comes in because a lot of people can eat ding-dongs and donuts in their eating window and lose weight as long as they have a fasting window. So that can be confusing for those who can't do that. The reality is that most people are not going to be able to do that for an extended period of time. You really have to do more things right, and that video will kind of walk you through some of those simple things. But one thing that we really want to look at next is stress. And there can be stress in your life. Your life can be creating stress where you're raising like cortisol and all these stress hormones. And a lot of these stress hormones can do things like cause the body to create its own glucose. So if you're stressed and the body's making glucose so that the body has fuel to deal with what it's viewing as an emergency, then it's like you're eating when you're not, because blood sugar is going up because your body is making this glucose. The other thing is that the stress can be in your body. It doesn't have to be in your life. You may be like, hey, I'm chill. But if your body is stressed, then that can create the same response as if you were running from a lion or stressed out at work. You know, a person can also have like chronic infections, and a lot of people are dealing with infections that they don't even know that they have. There can be digestive overgrowth of bacteria or fungal or SIBO type issues, and people can have infections like a Lyme's disease issue, or all these things that you hear about people having that they didn't know that they had. And if the body's dealing with an infection, it's like it's going to war all the time. So that can create a lot of stress for the body, even if your life is not stressed. And the stress in the body can raise and affect those hormone levels the same way that you being stressed could affect it. So that can really restrict weight loss for a lot of people. Problem number 3 can be depleted resources. So when we're trying to get the body to let go of stored fat, it needs to be able to operate the way that it wants to operate. If it doesn't have enough resources to operate correctly, that's a stress to the body. It's not going to be willing to let go of that stored fat because that's money in the bank. That's backup resources that it has a fuel source that it can go to when it runs out of everything that it can do. So if things aren't going well, it wants to hold on to its backup. So we need things to be working well. So if a person is just eating nutrient poor foods, they're trying to do this junk food intermittent fasting where they're just eating packaged junk, or maybe they're not really bringing in the nutrients that the body needs, well, the body's not getting the nutrients it needs to function. So now we're going to restrict resources even more. We're going to cut out half the day when we used to be at least getting something, and now we're getting nothing. That's magnifying that stress that the body was dealing with of not having enough resources to function correctly. A lot of people will pee out too many minerals. So one of the benefits of intermittent fasting is that while you're not eating, it allows insulin levels to come down. Insulin takes a lot longer to come down than blood sugar. So if we can allow insulin to come down, well, now the body can access stored fat and burn it for fuel. As long as insulin is high, the body can't access that stored fat. So that's a benefit of intermittent fasting. But for a lot of people, when insulin levels go too low, it will cause them to pee out more minerals. And if their minerals were already low, maybe they weren't eating the right kind of foods, or maybe they don't have the ability to break their food down correctly. You have to be able to digest your food to be able to get all the nutrients out of that food. And in order to do that, a person needs to be making enough stomach acid in their stomach. It's very common for someone not to be making enough stomach acid today. And they also need this bile in the gallbladder to come down and meet with that acid so that bile and the pancreatic enzymes can all neutralize those acids and everything really gets busted apart so we can get all the nutrients out of that food. So if either of those sides of digestion are not working correctly, a person might not really be getting all the minerals out of their food and getting all the nutrients that the body needs. So now again, low resources being magnified because a person's going to use intermittent fasting and eat less often. So this right here, these depleted resources, this can be one of those stresses for the body. Not having resources is a stress to the body. That's like you trying to pay $1,800 worth of bills with $12. That's a big stress to you. So that can happen with the body as well. You also hear a lot about people saying, well, you're not getting results on intermittent fasting because you're not sleeping well. You're not getting into a deep state of sleep. Your sleep is poor. And that's stressing the body out and raising stress hormones in the next day to where you can actually create inflammation just because you didn't sleep very well. So the problem is that I kind of feel like a lot of times this sleep has to do with some of the problems that intermittent fasting could be magnifying. A lot of times people aren't sleeping because the body's in this stress state because it doesn't have the resources it needs to function correctly. So it goes into this fight or flight state. And then how are you going to sleep when you're in a state where the body should be optimizing to run away from a lion? When we're in that sympathetic fight or flight state, it's hard to sleep. When you don't have enough resources, the body can be like, hey, get up, do something about this. We're running out of stuff. Go get a sandwich or something. So a lot of people who can't sleep are having issues where the resources or their minerals are going too low and the body is sort of crashing. And if you're having sleep troubles, we'll put a link in the description below for our videos on why you can't sleep, because there's other causes of insomnia and sleep troubles too. And the fasting may just be magnifying those problems for you. It might not be the fasting that's creating sleep trouble. Maybe you had sleep trouble before you started fasting. But in any case, I don't view it as just the sleep that's restricting weight loss. If you took a sleeping pill and actually slept, you still might not lose weight because you haven't fixed the actual cause that was creating any trouble. Another issue is insulin resistance. If someone is leaning on that insulin resistant side, then their cells aren't really listening to insulin very well. They're not processing any glucose that the body might be making or glucose that comes from carbohydrates or sugars that we are eating. And when the body can't process that glucose correctly, it just makes more insulin to try and do the job a little bit better. And those higher levels of insulin will take longer to come down, and then the body can't access stored fat and burn that for fuel. So if this is a problem, this needs to be corrected. And the biggest issue that a person could have already been dealing with before they started fasting, or it could have been magnified by the fasting, is bile becoming too thick and sticky to flow correctly. And this has the ability to create a world of trouble. Because like we talked about, this bile is this soapy substance that's made by the liver, and then it comes down and it gets stored in the gallbladder until it's ready to use. But when that food gets acidified in the stomach and then it leaves the stomach and comes down here into the small intestine, that's what triggers this gallbladder to squirt that bile down there to help neutralize those acids. That bile helps us emulsify or break down our dietary fats, and it also helps us access fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K. So all of those are really crucial for the body to work like the body is supposed to work. So if this bile becomes too thick and sticky to flow correctly, then it doesn't come down here and really help us break down that food and get all the nutrients out of that food. It doesn't help us emulsify those fats so that the body can use those fats. So if we're consuming fats that can't be digested, they become a problem to the body. The body can't use them. It's like, what am I going to do with them now? Oh, I can shove them in these fat cells for safekeeping until the coast is clear, and then I can worry about how to get them out of the body later. So we can actually be expanding our pants just because the bile is not flowing well enough to help us emulsify those fats. Another problem is that the liver filters all these toxins and junk out of the body, and it puts a lot of those toxins into the bile. So when the bile comes down here to the intestinal tract, it's carrying those toxins with it so that the toxins can go through the intestinal tract and then out the back door when we poop like a champion. So when bile becomes too thick and sticky to flow correctly, that detox pathway is not working. Now all those toxins are staying in the system and making the system more toxic, and the body might take some of those and shove those in fat cells for safekeeping as well. So that's a lot of problems that can happen just when bile's not flowing. And the reason that this can magnify when we're fasting is because the gallbladder's job is to concentrate that bile so that a small amount of bile is more effective when it comes down here. So if there's no food coming in for long periods of time, then there's no acidic food to come down here and trigger the gallbladder to do its job of squirting that bile down. So if the bile's not being triggered, it just stays in the gallbladder. Well, the gallbladder's job is to concentrate it. So it's just going to continue to concentrate that bile until it concentrates it into sludge or even stones. And you don't want gallstones. Having gallstones can include screaming and cuss words that you didn't know that you even knew those cuss words. So it's not something that you really want to have. So if somebody's using intermittent fasting all the time, or even extended fasting can be even more problematic in this area, then they're really extending the amount of time that that bile is going to be in the gallbladder and that it's going to get concentrated. And we have a video on gallbladder troubles from prolonged fasting, and you can go check that out and just read the comments. And all the people were like, holy mackerel, this is what happened to me. I was fasting and then my gallbladder had this attack. And it's just the ability for this fasting and the extended window of time for that gallbladder to hold the bile in there. But also when we look at these other factors of resources that can go low from someone peeing out too many minerals, not having enough nutrients, and then magnifying that problem by bringing in less nutrients all throughout the day. All those things can raise stress hormones like estrogen, and higher estrogen has the ability to thicken up this bile so that it won't flow correctly. So it's not just the concentration factor, there's more factors to this. And this also helps us understand why this is no problem for some people. Some people have their bile flowing great, and a little bit of fasting is not going to stop that from happening to them because things are moving through the way that they should. But it's very common today for someone's bile to already be too thick and sticky before they even implement any intermittent fasting. And for those folks, they have the ability to create some trouble in a big hurry to where they're, oh man, I'm seeing great results by fasting, I'm feeling great, and then a month or two later, all of a sudden I'm not. Well, this is a possibility. So we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow, so you can check that out and see, do I have other signs? Is this a problem for me? If I correct this, would I start to get the results from the intermittent fasting that I was getting before? So you can see that this can be a little bit of a tricky situation, because between all the mistakes that somebody can make doing things wrong, where they really shouldn't be getting great results anyways just because they're doing so many things the wrong way, or stress in a life or in the body, or just resources that aren't working correctly, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So it can be a little bit tricky, and you might have to do some work to figure out what's going wrong with you. And if you want to learn how to look at your body chemistry to see are there imbalances or malfunctions that might be restricting my ability to lose weight, then my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, will kind of walk you through how to run simple self-tests at home that you can do with tools you pick up at a pharmacy or a health food store. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'm going to put a link in the description below where you can get the whole thing totally for free. And that'll just walk you through that process of understanding what's going on with your body and why it might be operating different than your neighbors. My neighbors are doing great on fasting. How come I'm not losing weight? But since this thickening up of the bile seems to be a very common problem for people that are, I was doing great and all of a sudden I'm not doing great on this fasting anymore, I'm going to point you to a video that shows 5 steps that you can do to thin this bile out, to make sure that it's flowing correctly. Just keep in mind that some of those steps are like supplements. And you don't want to take supplements in your fasting window, because then you're breaking your fast and you're doing some of these common mistakes that we talk about in that other video. So if you're going to take those steps using supplements, you want to do those during your eating window. So now, just jump over right now and check out that video on 5 ways to improve bile flow, so you can understand steps you can take to thin that out so it's flowing better, so that when you are fasting, you won't be magnifying any problems. I can't wait to hear about your results.